Well, hi, everybody. Welcome to My Favorite Mistake. I'm Mark Graven. Joining us today from the Greater Toronto area is Glenn Poulos. He is the co-founder, vice president, and general manager of Gap Wireless Inc., a leading distributor for the mobile broadband wireless and test and measurement equipment markets. Gap Wireless Inc. was recently acquired by Network Wireless Solutions. So before I tell you more about Glenn, first off, welcome to the podcast and congratulations on the deal.
Thanks, Mark. Happy to be here.
So let me tell you a little bit more about Glenn. So he has more than 3 decades of experience in sales. He's spent thousands of hours in the field or on the phone with customers and working with salespeople to help create several very successful companies. He entered the sales field in 1985 as a technical sales rep. He founded his first company, mmWave Technologies, in 1991, and then simultaneously served as president of Anritsu Electronics Ltd for 9 years. So he has extensive knowledge and experience in this industry. He lectures groups on sales strategy, consumerism, and what motivates people. So that'll give us a lot to talk about today. And his new book, released in February, is titled Never Sit in the Lobby: 57 Winning Sales Factors to Grow a Business and Build a Career Selling. And his website is glennpoulos.com. There'll be links to all of that in the show notes. So Glenn, a lot to look back on across those experiences. And I'm really excited to talk to you about sales and mistakes and tips in that realm. But as we always do here, I want to hear about your favorite mistake. What's your story?
Sounds good. Yeah, it's a little, I'm not sure ironic's the right word, but I compliment you on a unique formula for your podcast because I've enjoyed listening to some of the other people's mistakes and I'm going to pass on mine and and then maybe we can move on to some of the things I got right. And
talk about that.
As you know, yeah. So going back in the early 2000s, it's relevant. I was going through a divorce at the time and sort of settling into a new routine, as a part-time parent, Wednesdays every other weekend, that sort of a thing. That can be a tumultuous time going through an event like that. And, I can say with experience, it does take some time for that to settle down. And so, some distractions had sort of built into my life. And I didn't really notice how much until the events that I'm going to explain to you now. So these aren't really like excuses. I'm just sort of, painting the picture of why this might have happened in advance. So, So one day I was, chatting around the water cooler with one of the sales guys, Bob, and they often came to me for, to discuss either a technical matter, how to position a product technically, how to work on margins, pricing, what have you. And, Bob was querying me on a topic. And, at the end I said, look, if it doesn't go the way you need, or if you need more information, just give me a call. And if I'm not there, leave me a voicemail. And at that point, he kind of burst out laughing at me. And the way I try to explain it, it's the kind of laugh where sort of if you had a sip of water in your mouth or something like that, he would have spit it all over me, kind of a thing, right? Like kind of a guffaw. An
involuntary response.
Yeah, an involuntary response. And I'm like, what's so funny, right? And I asked him, right? And he goes, you're kidding, right? And I'm like, no, why would I be kidding? Like, call me, leave me a voicemail. And so, I kept cajoling him, and he seemed reticent, and and I said, look, just either call me and leave me a voicemail or explain what's going on. And he said, I guess you haven't heard the standing joke then. And at this point I was freaking out and, getting flustered with it. And I'm like, I really don't know what you're talking about. And, can you just, elaborate, please, Bob? And
Right.
And he's like, hey, don't shoot the messenger. And I'm like, okay, no problem. Spit it out. And he said, look, there's a standard joke about you in the company. And, and it says, and basically they're saying, call and leave them a voicemail and everyone laughs. And the whole idea behind it was that basically I wasn't answering the phone and I wasn't returning voicemails. And so, imagine someone phones you on the phone, you don't pick up, they leave you a voicemail, you don't listen to the voicemails, you don't phone them back. They're virtually impossible to get a hold of unless they literally walked into my office and got a hold of me. And at that time, looking back, that was literally the only way people were able to nail me down. And many of my guys were spread out across North America. I mean, we had offices all across Canada, the United States. We had 3 offices in Mexico. So the fact that the head of the sales department was hard to get a hold of at this time was pretty bad. And sometimes you hear these things about yourself, and this, it flushes across you as like this wave of like, oh my God, is that me? And and it was, you almost get choked up, like either thinking about it or talking about it, right? But at the time, I realized that it was true. And obviously I had to do something about it. And but I learned the lesson that when the phone rings, you have to pick it up. And if someone leaves a voicemail, call them back, right? And the biggest takeaway that I always tell people is, now I'm actually the what we call the final rollover on our phone. So if you phone my company, Gap Wireless, and you're like 00, or you go 000, it comes directly to me.
Yeah.
And if you hit sales or accounting or something, they don't answer, and they hit 0, or they back out, or they try to go around, it always ends up at my phone, which is forwarded to my cell phone. Yeah. And I pick it up, whenever I possibly can, as a result of having learned from my past mistake. And the harsh part about it was that there was an inside joke, and which they abridged to, oh, call, leave them a voicemail. Yeah. Giggle, laugh, right? Yeah. And so that's sort of the long and the short of it. And but it's a lesson that this is in my old business. I have a new business that I've been running for 15 years now. That it was a hard lesson to learn, but one that I carried forward with me until this day. And
Yeah. I mean, it stings. There's a couple different levels of the story I want to dig into, and thank you for sharing it, Glenn. One, I guess, is the sting of unsolicited feedback. It sounds like you took it to heart. I mean, have you taken steps beyond returning the calls to ask people for feedback? How are you doing as a boss, as a VP, as a leader?
Well, yeah. So to address that directly, I mean, I'm not sure that I specifically asked them for feedback in that way, but I'm overtly open in terms of my door policy, right? Like, I mean, many people have, my door is always open, and then you walk by and their door's closed, right? And like in this situation here, I'm actually calling from my office, and I come here every day, even through COVID, from March 2020 till today. I've only not been here 1 or 2 days in that entire time. Yeah. And my door is normally open. And there's a story in the book that I talk about, never get a black couch. And when COVID started, I got a black couch, right? And the whole idea was, if you get a black couch, people are going to drop in it and they're going to start telling you their problems. And usually
is it like a therapy couch? Is that what it?
Well, yeah, like it is that. And I don't mind it for that. It was the story and the lesson in the book is about people, like business people, coming in and flopping in the black couch, and they would have a great business idea. The only thing they would never have was money, right? And they're like, got this great idea, but all I need is some money, right? Your money, and et cetera. And so that's why the lesson of the never get a black couch. But I am very rather than asking them to tell me how they feel about me, I'm very inquisitive of how people are doing, and very observant of distractions in their world. And perhaps other people have parenting issues, maybe they have some medical issues that they need some special support, and we've always worked to provide customized special treatment for everyone. And if somebody needs some special dispensation for an issue, we'll look at it and try to help them. And then when we need extra help from them, they're more than willing to help back, right? Yeah. So I feel that I'm approachable, and that I will show empathy, which again is something that I go on ad nauseum in the book about being empathetic.
Yeah. So if by the way, while we're recording here, if the phone rolls over to you, you can grab it and I can pause.
I silenced the ring. Yeah, actually, in the ring, I had to disconnect the ringer so it wouldn't ring. Yeah.
But thinking back to, that pattern that people were joking about, it sounds like it was unintentional. I'm going to tell a quick story. You're prompting my memory. Somebody I worked with back in a factory in like the 1995, 1996 timeframe at General Motors in Michigan. We literally had answering machines on our desk. I'm dating myself.
Wow. Yeah.
They had a cassette tape in it.
Yeah.
And then they transferred us actually over into a voicemail system. But there was one engineer who was notorious for either having, his mailbox would be full. This was probably in the voicemail era of that time. You literally could not leave a message. You would have to go find him or put a note on his desk and roll the dice with that. But I remember talking to him once, and he kind of confided in me that was absolutely an intentional strategy,
right,
on his part, to leave the voicemail full, because it was something to the effect of like, yeah, well, if it's actually important, they'll come find me.
Yeah, that didn't work out so well for me. I was kind, in a way, I was involuntary, like sort of unconsciously doing the same thing, right? As that guy was. I wasn't using it as a screening technique, but I was doing it as an emotional buffer, because I was just like, I wasn't just myself at the time, and it was hard talking to people. And but I sure learned my lesson, and as I went forward and I started a new company not that far later, I brought those lessons forward with me, and I still follow them to this day. And
well, that's good. So it's good that Bob gave you the feedback. I mean, it's possible nobody would have laughed or spoken up,
right,
or somebody later might have.
Yeah, those are the worst jokes, the ones you never find out about, and you're the subject matter. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Glenn, for sharing the story and the reflections and the learning around that. And, I'm sure there's a lot of reflections and like you said, things done well in your career, not just mistakes that lead to the book, Never Sit in the Lobby. And again, the subtitle is 57 Winning Sales Factors to Grow a Business and Build a Career Selling. Was 57 just sort of how it worked out? Like when the list was done, you're like, okay, it's 57.
Yeah, I mean, I have friends and family that are sort of counting them, and they're like, "Well, you don't number them," and I'm going through them, and I'm not sure it's exactly 57. So my second mistake might be that, but it's the editor helped me with that tagline. I struggled for quite a while to figure out what to say next, and when it was presented to me as a suggestion, I thought, "Wow, that's awesome. I love it." So we went with it, and it's basically just a collection. It's another topic for it could be sort of like 57 ways not to make more mistakes, because a lot of the book is about mistake avoidance, not a how-to. It's not a recipe card. Do this, do this, do that. There's a lot of like suggestions, go in and say this or do that and what have you. But a lot of them are like, here's a mistake that I made and how I avoid it now, or, a way I approach something that I learned a harsh lesson from. So I have lots of mistakes. Yeah. But this one that I shared with you today is one that I actually have to, the importance for me today to retelling it is not for myself, because I already answer the phone. I already know I'm going to answer the phone. It's not me, it's all my salespeople or people that I'm close to that are in sales, or, people that I'm talking to, or maybe mentoring, or someone's asking for advice or what have you. And I know they're sort of behaving in a similar way. And I don't say, answer the damn phone. I say, let me tell you a story about what happened to me, and the, what the takeaway was for the people. Right. And then they tend to think about it in slightly different capacity, and they can't really argue it when it's something that's happened to me versus them. Right. But I can get my point across that they need to pick up the phone.
That seems like a good leadership tactic there, where you're not making them the bad guy. You're sharing a story and letting them come to a conclusion of what their behavior should be.
Yeah. And honestly, the book is loaded with some other mistakes that I've made, hiring mistakes, strategy mistakes and what have you. And so.
There's benefit in learning from the mistakes of others. I think there's something to be said then also for being aware of your own mistakes. That's one thing I hope the listener takes away from listening to these mistakes, is like, well, you could avoid doing what Glenn did, but then maybe they're aware of their own mistakes. So my question back to you is, as much as we might talk about learning from mistakes, some mistakes could be a deal killer, a company killer, a career killer. Like, that seems, there are certain settings where you can't be, I don't know what the right way to say it, blasé about
Right.
like, well, I have no big deal. I lost the deal, but I'm going to learn from it. Like, you can't live by that, right?
Yeah. There's another mistake, I mean, that I made that that you'll probably say, hey, why didn't you pick that as your biggest mistake? And because it became my greatest success, really, is I built my business from 1991 through the mid 2000s for exactly 15 years, just like this business here that grew for 15 years. And then I sold it. And sort of at the 13 and a half year mark of the first company, I sold my shares to a public company who gave me shares back in the public company. And I became a part of an operating unit of a public company. And we were very profitable, threw off a lot of cash. There were sister companies that I could see, in broad daylight, were very successful. And I was too young and naive, and I didn't do proper due diligence with the public company partners. And to make a long story short, they, within 18 months, they had basically crippled us financially. They ran the line of credits up, they stretched the vendors, and 18 months later, we went into receivership, and I had to start over. And that's how I created Gap Wireless, and was virtually doing almost the exact same thing coming out of, and of course I lost many millions of dollars of shares that I thought were worth something, but by then they had become worthless. I had gone from a multi-millionaire on paper, to broke overnight and no company. And but I started over, and I got to do Gap Wireless, and there were other mistakes along the way that company had made, and I vowed not to make them, in terms of a lot around customer service, pricing, margins, strategy, and then and I've always loved working here. So in a way, it was a bad thing. And I mean, some people question me why I didn't cry more about the money and what have you, but it was all on paper. And I didn't have it going into the deal. I didn't have it coming out of the deal. So it was kind of like always, up in the ether to me. And so I just bounced back, and and I was able to take those lessons and do it differently within Gap Wireless, my new company.
And so I'm sure that influenced the way you would think through potential buyers then for Absolutely. Gap Wireless.
Yes. Yeah, the partners that bought our company now are, just tier one private equity company. They bought a U.S. firm that bought us, and they are, at the pinnacle of they're just a great company. They're called Grain Management is their name, and they're very proud to be a part of their company. And they've got a great legacy that they're building, and so I didn't think twice about that. That's not a checkbox I didn't check this time.
Yeah, right.
And so.
Well, I appreciate you sharing, a bonus story there, but
right.
Again, the key is the lesson, reflecting on the lessons, and you had an opportunity to avoid repeating the mistake. And so I applaud you for that. So back to the book, Glenn, Never Sit in the Lobby. So I would not consider myself a sales professional. I've been involved with sales and a couple times in my career, software companies, consulting. And so the title of your book, Never Sit in the Lobby. I have sat in the lobby. I'd be curious to hear your thoughts then. Like, this seems like an important one because it's, as the title of the book. What mistake was I making?
Well, that's strike one, right?
So sometimes people aren't on time, and then you feel stupid sitting there looking at the ceiling, sitting on a black couch in the lobby. Maybe
that's one of the big. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please go ahead. Yeah.
So that's one of the many reasons why I never sit in the lobby. I literally never sit in the lobby, and I mean, I've had to stand there for an hour, and my feet are burning. But I'm like, the rules are rules. Don't sit down, because the second I would sit down, they'd walk in, and then I would have been sitting, and they would have seen me sitting in the lobby. And it's just a rule that I made. Other people have other rules, like they always finish what's on their plate, and some people maybe they they have a rule that they shouldn't finish everything on their plate for some reason. And it's like, why do you pick that and you pick that? That's just the rule. But it's basically so that when the customer walks in, you're at eye level with them. And I tend to be a bit short. So, I mean, I have to, I need to struggle to get to eye level sometimes with people. So I don't want to further enhance it by sitting down. Right. So I don't want them coming at me from an upper angle where I got to look up at them in a strange way and stand up and flub to put things away. So I'm always standing up. Not only am I standing up, but I'm not distracted. So I'm not looking at my phone. Absolutely not. My phone is away. I'm staring pretty much, plus or minus a few degrees of staring at the door. I'm pretty sure they're going to walk out of. And so when they walk out, I'm ready to grab their hand and say, how you doing? My name's Glenn. Nice to meet you. Or if I've seen them, know them, great seeing you again, et cetera, et cetera. Right. And, I find that sometimes if you're sitting down, you're going to flub through your stuff. You're gonna be looking at magazines. I just don't find it as professional as the standing part. And so that's what I do. And that's what I taught my sales guys to do as well.
Yeah. So the emphasis clearly is the never sit part. Like at first you might think like, don't be in the lobby. And maybe there's a related rule of like, don't show up too early. Right. Because then maybe you look like you don't have anything better to do.
Yeah. So we have a rule: slightly early is on time and on time is late. Right. So we would never want to show up more than 10 minutes before the appointment, because you can become a nuisance. Back in the day, not so much now, because you're probably standing alone in the lobby. You called up on a phone and the guy's coming down to get you. But before, there was a receptionist there. Yeah. And, you kind of look, strange, pacing around, and not showing up on time. A lot of guys would also use the phone in the lobby and make all their calls. I actually splurged the quarters back then. And then in '86, I got a cell phone. I mean, I didn't make my next phone calls in the other customers' lobbies where a lot of guys did. It's just another rule that I followed. Then the next immediate rule right after that is when you show up, you never sit in the lobby, and you always have something in your hand and something in your mind. And people are like, what are you talking about, dude? And I'm like, and so I talk about in the book, donuts, maybe it's a giveaway item, maybe it's a brochure, maybe it's a report, an article. It might be the quote. A lot of times my way in is the quote that they'd asked for, which I go on as using that as a really good technique to get in front of the customer when they call and ask for pricing. And you can, and they say, oh, I just need a quote. And I'm like, they're just like back in the day, it was fax it to me, email it to me, now text it to me, whatever. But I'm like, I'm going to be there tomorrow. Why don't I just drop it off? And they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm busy. Like, just drop it off. And I'm like, okay, I'll drop it off in the lobby. And then I would show up in the lobby, wouldn't stand, quote in my hand. What was in my mind was to talk to him about the quote. The receptionist says, is he expecting you? I said, well, yeah, he asked me for a quote. And then she calls up. She says, Glenn's here. He says he has a quote for you. He's like, oh, yeah, right. And half the time they forgot that they told me they didn't want to come down and talk to me. Yeah. And they know I'm standing there. So they come down and then I can hand them the quote. Sometimes they bring me in and sometimes they just send me on my way because they're busy. Right. But at least I say, hey, can you have a quick look and see if we're in the ballpark, or, get your first glance, and you can see their face either light up or, look shocked. And then you can say, wow, you look shocked. I mean, should we book some time to go over this in more detail? And those rules are the ones I follow on our own. Like, and if I can just continue on with one more, the next one is never forget a face, right? So before I walked in the lobby, of course I was a bit early, but I was in my car and I was actually going through my phone or my laptop, or in the old days it was a call book, and I show a picture of an old call book. And I was actually basically associating the face with the name of every single person in that customer, because some of my customers were 12 guys, maybe even 20 people. Most of them, it was only 3 or 4. But the way I am, it's like I would walk by a guy. If I didn't do this rule, I would walk by the guy and say, hey, and my random access memory is not fast enough to like pull the name out quickly. Right. Yeah. Right. And so I go through that episode in my car. And so I'd be walking through the building, another rule, always ask for a mini tour. And so, like, hey, you have a new lab, could you give me a little mini tour of it? And they're saying, why do you ask for a mini tour? And I'm like, because if I ask for a tour, they think I need to go on a grand tour. But if I say mini, they think, oh, he just needs a little quick look. And then I'd be walking through the building and I'd be saying, hey, Jack, hey, Bob, hey, Sally, hey, John. And the guy that I'm with is like, oh my God, this guy knows everybody. And everybody that I'm meeting is like, I can't believe that guy constantly remembers me. He only met me like 2 years ago, or they can't even remember who I am until 3 hours later, right? They finally put it together. And I just repeat those processes over and over again. They're just simple goals of how to do it right to me, right? Never forget their face. Don't get caught with that, where you're stumbling, trying to remember their name and calling them, hey, you. And
But I mean, it seems like nowadays maybe you could use LinkedIn as those reminders if people have photos on their profile, even if you're not connected. And
absolutely,
it sounds like what I hear you saying, Glenn, is that sales, it's not just about having the right technical solution to somebody's problem, that relationships matter greatly. Perception of you as the individual and your professionalism and your attention to them, that's a big part of closing the deal, right? Yeah.
Beyond closing the deal, my second win for me is them saying, we love doing business with you, right? Like, we love dealing with you. We like seeing you, back in the day when I was a little bit younger, but I mean, some of my competitors invited me in to talk to their people about some of these strategies. And, and I maintain friendships with both my coworkers and my competitors throughout the years for the last 30 something years. And so that's very important to me. And I do think it makes all the difference, especially when you want to poke and, at different levels in the company, like you've met the VP, you've met the CEO or somebody like that, or the CFO, and, you didn't forget their face. And, maybe you had something in your hand in mind when you spoke to them the first time 2 years ago, but you can always touch base with that person. They're like, oh yeah, he wasn't a pain in the ass and he was nice to deal with, and they're friendly and polite. And you can get that important question across. Like, this is a $250,000 sale. I know it's going to hit your desk. Is this going to be a problem for you guys? Do I need to come and schedule some time with you and the finance team to go over options? Right.
Yeah.
And,
Is there a lesson around, like, given the choice, if you're local, what I hear you saying, let me check, is if you can come deliver the quote in person, that's far better than emailing it or FedExing it.
Well, I'm not sure if you're trying to, if you're because you're perfectly leading me into one of the chapters, which is it's the first chapter, and it's called Never Fax the Facts and Never Ship the Shit.
Yeah.
Right. And one guy said to me recently, he says, oh, you got to update this because, no one knows what a fax machine is. And I'm like, I made up the rule in 1980 something. Right. I mean, and It talks about LinkedIn. It talks about digital marketing later in the chapter. But the point is that, we're selling, and I know with COVID, it's kind of strange because especially, I'm from Canada, right? We're just coming out of our restrictions more so than other places, right? And our guys are now all on calls in the last couple of weeks, and thank goodness. And but so people are like, oh, no one makes calls anymore because everybody was on Zoom, right? But our stuff is all sold like at the customers. Like we are selling very high technology, high ticket items, either to the wireless industry or we sell measuring instruments, and the customers need to look at them. They need to use them, trial them. We need to show them how they work, and it's all done face to face, right? We don't sell, like some guys that might sell SaaS or something like that might have a different model slightly, but still, I think the high ticket items, the account manager goes and visits the customer in most cases. And so my rule is always never fax the facts or email or text them. And if something's being delivered to the customer, always be there, to make sure that they're using it. Right.
Yeah. So a couple other questions. Again, our guest, there's my most recent speaking mistake. My guest, Glenn Poulos, he's the author of the book, Never Sit in the Lobby. There's one interesting phrase in the book I was going to ask you about. You use this phrase, greed-based learning. What does that mean when it comes to sales?
Yeah. People are always like, what's this greed and whatever, right? And so greed-based learning was a technique that I used to explain to my salespeople that were perplexed because we work with about 70 manufacturers from around the world, and each one of them, let's say they have 10 products, perhaps, maybe even 5 products, that's 300 to 700 products that we need to sort of understand in order to properly represent them in our said territory, right? Mm-hmm. And they range, the gamut of technology in our space. And so the sales guys are, I can never learn this. Like, I need the applications engineer with me on every call. And I'm like, no, that's not true. And they're like, how am I supposed to learn this? And I'm like, GBL. And they're like, GBL, what's that? And I'm like, greed-based learning. And I'm like, so the first example I give is, and it's all about attention to detail. It's like, have you ever watched a football game and, you didn't have anything at stake and, you got distracted and what have you. And then the next day you watched a different game, but you had $5 on it with your brother, right? Just imagine the difference between your attentiveness over $5, right?
Yeah.
$5 creates an infinite change in your attention level, right? Mm. And so my point is that XYZ Corp or, Technicore or whatever, make up a name. They sell 5 different instruments. You at least know enough that, ABC company might be interested in one of their products. So now all of a sudden, well, dude, figure out what the commission is on that and go home the night before and equate learning the top 5 bullet points on that product to the commission that's available to you at the end of the sales cycle. Mm. And all of a sudden, when they start equating, so it's like when you're buying a new car, right? You have to actually sort of because you have to be able to feel what I'm trying to say. So, I'm not a person that knows a lot about cars until the day I'm looking for a new car. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, my last couple of cars have been Mercedes cars, and I love them to the ends of the earth, and I'm an expert on them. Anything you want to know about Mercedes, I could tell you. And it's all about the sort of greedy, temptation of getting the car. Yeah. If I was looking at a Mazda, I'd become an expert at all the features of the Mazda. Mm-hmm. And how did I do it? Because I don't know cars at all. But I'd be cocking dual overhead cams with specialized exhausts and dropped offset tires and a this and a that, and specialized carbon fiber hood, and then I would just go back to my normal thing of not caring about cars. And most people can sort of relate to that, right? Yeah. And so I use that same approach to the moment I have an opportunity, it sounds a little greedy, but, an opportunity to make money from something, my ability to learn it goes up exponentially. And I try to inspire that sort of ideal in my guys, right? Think about it in that way. Don't try to learn all 700 at night because you don't have an opportunity. But the second you do, just learn that one.
That makes a lot of sense because of all the things that you could be learning about in the world, at some point you've got to focus. Exactly. And I could see the point. I mean, I think this applies to organizations. Don't give people blanket training in something that information that they might not really need or use, because it's probably going to just completely float out of the brain as quickly as it came across them. Yeah. But when there's motivation and incentive, like I'm learning something that I can use right away. Yeah, absolutely. That's powerful. That incentive, even if it's not financial, is there.
That's exactly right. That's exactly GBL to a T.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
you reminded me of a time I shopped for a car probably 5 or 6 years ago. I won't say the maker, but I had done enough research, to your point, Glenn, of I knew the 3 different engine options. Right. But at some point, I wanted to test drive a couple of them because I didn't really know what the performance would be and if it was worth it. And I remember, the salesperson might have been fairly new on the job, but he knew nothing about the 3 engines. He didn't know the sizes or that one was turbo powered. And I basically just walked away and I'm like, well, okay. I was very unimpressed, but his greed incentive should have been to know those engines because it was very likely a customer would ask. I wouldn't expect him to know about all of the engines of all of his competitors.
Right. There's I'm plugging the book, right? But there's a great story in the book called My Mentor Made Me Do It. And it's the story about a kid that worked for me that went from driving the tow motor, the forklift in the warehouse with no training, didn't graduate high school, didn't graduate college, and was a warehouse worker. And he went from that to being a very high paid salesperson selling very high technology items. And people are like, how did he do it? Right. And I'm like, his mentor made him do it. And basically, it was through a couple of techniques. One, of course, was GBL. But the thing that we added on to it was to try to build the confidence that he could do it, because he had a natural knack. He was really good at gaming. He knew that, no problem. There were some other sort of techie things that he would just learn out of nowhere, right? And then the other key part that I tell in that story is where I said, look, don't just send a resume to, and he wanted to sell cars, right? Which is why I brought it up. I said, don't just like send a resume to, Hyundai and Mazda and Toyota and whatever, all these car places.
Mm-hmm.
I said, listen, what you're going to do is you're going to walk in you're going to not stand in the lobby. You're going to have something in your hand and something in your mind. What's in your hand is your resume. And you're going to walk in and you're going to ask to talk to the sales manager, to the lady, right? And normally that they don't scrutinize you talking to those people, right? And when he walks up to you, say, hey, hey Bob, I'm here to start selling some cars for you. And the guy's usually like, what are you talking about? Right? And I'm like, don't say anything. Like just wait a few seconds and then wait for the pregnant pause and then say, no, I'm just kidding. I said, I wanted to talk to you about getting a job. I've got my resume here. I love your brand. You're new. And then I would GBL him. And, I was coaching him the days before these interviews. He had 10 interviews, and he had 3 offers on the spot. And there were a couple more that came in later. He took the job at his favorite car company. And he then actually leap-scotched into a much, more lucrative technical sales role from straight from the warehouse, right, straight. And so, these techniques work, actually.
Yeah.
They do.
Yeah. Well, I encourage people to check out the book. And if I should check it out, because sales is not going to be just in my past, and there's a lot more to learn. The book is Never Sit in the Lobby. And Glenn, one other question for you. There's a section in the book that talks about when to stop compromising with your customer. Why is that important? What should you do instead of compromising? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, usually the compromising is it's a lot tied in with my rule of freedom begins with no. And people are like, what does that mean? Right. And I'm like, when you keep saying yes and you're compromising, the deal or the situation with the customer, all the work falls upon you with a yes. It's no different than, your neighbor has to borrow your lawnmower or something like that. And you're like, oh, okay, sure, you can have my lawnmower. And then all of a sudden he doesn't give it back right away. And then you need it. You got to go ask for it. All the pain is on you because you said yes. And, if you could just say, no, it's not working right now, it's not working. Or you just say, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy with it. You can't have it. Right. Freedom begins when you say, no, you don't have to do anything else. You're done. Right. And a lot of our salespeople that I've coached, we would help them structure deals, and there would be a built-in sort of compromise window available. For instance, we knew there was negotiations, you build that in, different things, there may be an option that you had available, and you would sort of allow whatever the customer was, maybe a 1 or 2, maybe a 3 sort of cycle. But then at that point, that's it, right? Mm-hmm. And you should know that in advance. And we would have some salespeople in the past that would say, the guy would say, like, okay, fine, like you did good or whatever, but I'm going to still need to, to go back and get me another few points. And, I need you to improve the delivery. And I coach them in that example to say, thank you for your feedback. I understand, your position, but, knowing the importance of this deal, we came in with our best price today. And as a matter of fact, lead time's actually, deteriorating. So if we don't get an order this week, not only will I not improve the lead time, but it's going to extend. Right. And just say no. And that's the kind of, when you're compromising, you end up taking all the burden, and it doesn't become a win-win deal. I talk about there's a spot where I talk about win-win-win-win, where everyone wins. The customer, the vendor, the salesman, and the manufacturer of the product. It's a 4-way win, in my opinion.
Yeah. And finding, so compromise might end up being more win-lose on some level. and you're
Right.
avoiding
Win-lose is never good. Like what if I, or say the salesman did come back and I said, sure, let's sell it at 5 points, like whatever. And I'm like, but there won't be any commission. So we can't afford to pay commission because all of our overhead's 5% or something, right? This is an example. How's that win for the salesman? It's not, right? Or the other way around. We do pay him on that, but I don't pay my heat and light, with the margin. And it has to be win-win. And, and if it warrants it, we'll go back to the manufacturer and ask them to participate, and we'll ask the customer to participate. Can you pay early? Can you pay COD? Can you pay in an earlier amount of time? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us a deposit? Whatever. There's a million sort of flexible ways you can get the customer to participate in those compromises.
Yeah. Well, a lot of great lessons here today, Glenn, and I know there are 57 or more great lessons in the book. Our guest today has been Glenn Poulos. The book, again, is Never Sit in the Lobby, 57 Winning Sales Factors to Grow a Business and Build a Career Selling. His website is glennpoulos.com. You can find the book on Amazon, Amazon.ca or Amazon.com.
And .com, both of them, yeah.
Other booksellers as well, I'm sure. So Glenn, really enjoyed it today. Thank you for sharing your story and your lessons. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark. I really enjoyed being here. Thank you for having me.